1 million years ago, long before cities, before farms, before written words, the world belonged to wind, stone, and survival. Across the vast grasslands that stretch between what we now call Africa and Asia, early humans lived as wanderers. They followed herds, searched for water, and feared the long, cold nights when predators ruled the darkness. Among one small tribe lived a young girl named Asha. She was no more than 12 summers old. Yet her eyes held the sharpness of someone who had seen too much hunger and too many storms. Her people belonged to a species we would later call Homo erectus, strong walkers, firekeepers, and tireless travelers. Life was never easy. The sun burned fiercely during the day, cracking the dry earth. At night, icy winds swept across the plains. Food was uncertain. Sometimes the hunters returned with meat from wild antelope. Sometimes they returned with nothing but silence. The tribe survived on roots, berries, and whatever small animals they could catch. Asha was different from the others. While the boys trained with sharpened stones, she watched the horizon. She studied animal movements. She learned their paths, their habits. She understood something important. Survival was not only about strength. It was about understanding the land. One morning, while gathering edible roots near a rocky ridge, Asha saw something unusual. In the distance stood a strange animal, tall, long-legged, with a thick neck and calm, dark eyes. It was unlike the smaller deer her people hunted. Its body seemed built for the harsh plains. It moved slowly but confidently, as if it feared nothing. It was an ancient camel, a distant ancestor of the camels we know today. The creature appeared weak. One of its legs dragged slightly. Perhaps it had been injured by a predator or caught in rough terrain. The tribe would see it as food, a large meal, several days of survival. But Asha felt something else. She noticed how the animal endured the heat without searching, desperately for water. She noticed how it chewed thorny shrubs that other animals avoided. It carried strength within its body, strength designed for this brutal land. When Asha returned to the tribe and told the elders, they prepared their stone-tipped spears. Meat meant life. That night, Asha couldn't sleep. The wind howled, and she imagined the tall animal running across the plains. Something inside her whispered that killing it might feed them once, but understanding it could save them many times. At dawn, before the hunters left, Asha quietly slipped away. She followed the tracks across the dusty earth. Hours passed. The sun climbed high. Finally, she found the camel resting near a shallow patch of shade beneath jagged rocks. It looked at her not with fear, but with caution. Asha lowered her body slowly, placing her hands on the ground to show she meant no harm. Her tribe had never tamed an animal. They had never imagined partnership. The sun stood high above the endless plains of Asia, pouring heat over the dry land. Asha remained still, her small hands pressed into the warm dust. The ancient camel watched her carefully. Its long lashes flickered against the light, and its injured leg trembled slightly when it tried to shift position. Asha's heart pounded. She remembered the lessons of her tribe. Never approach a large animal alone. Never turn your back. Never trust what you cannot control. But something deeper than fear guided her now. She could see the animal was not a predator. It was tired, alone, vulnerable, just like any member of her tribe after a harsh winter. Slowly, Asha reached into the leather pouch tied around her waist. Inside were crushed herbs her mother used for wounds. She had gathered them that morning, though she hadn't known why. Now she understood. The camel made a low, rumbling sound as she moved closer, a warning, but not an attack. Asha stopped, lowered her gaze, and waited. Minutes passed. The wind blew strands of her dark hair across her face. Finally, the camel relaxed slightly, folding its long legs beneath its body. It did not run. Carefully, gently, Asha crept forward until she could see the injury clearly. A deep scrape cut along the animal's lower leg, crusted with dried blood and dust. It was painful, but not fatal. With trembling hands, she crushed the herbs and pressed them softly against the wound. The camel flinched, but did not strike. That was the moment everything changed. For the first time in human history, trust formed between hunter and beast. Over the next days, Asha returned secretly. She brought water in hollowed-out gourds. She brought tough shrubs the camel preferred. Each time, the animal allowed her closer. Each time, fear faded a little more. Back at the tribe's camp, food was growing scarce. The hunters had failed twice in a row. The elders spoke in worried tones. Some whispered of moving toward distant mountains. Others feared the journey would kill the weakest among them. Asha knew the truth. Wandering blindly would only exhaust them. On the fourth morning, the camel stood without limping. It was strong again. Asha felt joy rise inside her chest. She placed her hand gently against its neck. Its thick fur was coarse, warm from the sun. The animal did not move away. Then something extraordinary happened. The camel began to walk, slowly at first, and then looked back at her, as if asking her to follow. Across the plains they moved together. Hours passed. The land shifted from dry dust to scattered patches of green. In the distance, birds circled, a sign of water. Asha's breath caught. Beyond a rocky slope lay a hidden valley where underground springs surfaced into shallow pools. Vegetation grew thicker there. Life thrived quietly, unseen from the open plains. The camel had known. It had survived by memory, by knowing where water waited when the land turned cruel. The tribe stood at the edge of the dry plains, staring toward the distant ridge where Asha pointed. The elders were silent. Hunger had made them thin. The children were weak. Even the strongest hunters had begun to doubt their path. They had always survived by moving, walking across vast lands that stretched from what we now know as Africa into Asia. They were descendants of Homo erectus, travelers by nature, shaped by hardship, but this time felt different. The land ahead looked as lifeless as the one behind them. Asha follows an animal, one hunter muttered. Animals are food. Asha stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. This one knows where water lives. The tribe had never followed an animal for guidance. They followed tracks to hunt, not to learn. But desperation changes old beliefs. Finally, the oldest elder, his hair pale with age, his back bent from countless journeys, nodded slowly. We walk, he said. By midday, they reached the ridge. The sun burned hot and several children stumbled along the way. Doubt returned to the hunters' faces. But then the wind shifted. They smelled moisture. As they climbed over the rocks, the hidden valley revealed itself. Shallow pools shimmering under sunlight. Green shrubs growing thick around them, birds calling from above. Small animals scattered as the tribe approached. For a moment, no one moved. Then the children ran forward, laughing weakly as they touched water. Women knelt, filling hollowed gourds. Hunters dropped their spears and drank deeply. Life. The camel stood calmly at the valley's edge. The tribe watched it differently now. Not as prey, not as meat, but as something else, something powerful in a new way. Over the next weeks, they did not kill it. Instead, they observed. They learned how it chose certain plants that held moisture. They learned how it could travel long distances without drinking. They saw how its wide feet crossed soft sand without sinking. When the tribe moved again, the camel moved nearby, never tied, never forced, yet always returning. Trust had grown. Children began walking beside it. Hunters carried lighter loads, realizing they could move farther if they planned their journeys, around known water paths, the same paths the camel remembered. Something had shifted in human thinking. Survival was no longer only about overpowering nature. It was about understanding it. Generations later, humans would domesticate animals fully. They would build villages, create tools beyond stone, and eventually write history. But the seed of partnership, the idea that humans and animals could survive together, may have begun in moments like this. A girl who chose healing instead of hunting. A camel that shared the memory of water. Under the vast prehistoric sky, Asha sat beside the animal one evening, watching the sun sink behind golden plains. The tribe was stronger now. Children were laughing again. Fires burned steadily.